Okay, we're live now, Councillor Blake.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining our Executive Board meeting this afternoon, the last meeting of 2020, and I'm sure many of us will feel that we need to come to the end of this year. It's been obviously the most extraordinary year that any of us have ever experienced, and it's a real testament to our commitment that we're here meeting on Zoom and successfully getting through the business in hand. Can I move on to the agenda fully, please? And we'll just go through the agenda items, please. Item 1.
Thank you, Chair. Appeals to confirm, Chair. There's been no appeals received for today's meeting.
Item 2.
Exempt information. Yes, Chair. Should the board be agreeable? Appendix 1 to item 11, which is the arena development plots Claypit Lane, and Appendix 3 to item 19, which is disposal of land located on Whittlesford Green, Rothwell for extra care housing, are to be considered in private and designated as exempt from publication. And then item 3, Chair, late items. If you're agreeable, report entitled "Update on the Coronavirus Pandemic" has been circulated prior to the meeting for consideration as agenda item 7, and a report entitled "Update on the Council's preparations for the UK's exit from the EU" has been circulated prior to the meeting for consideration as agenda item 8, and also members have been provided with an updated map for inclusion within Appendix 1 to item 15, which is the White Rose Forest Strategy, for their consideration as part of that item.
Okay, thank you. Item 4, can I ask if any members have any direct pecuniary interest they wish to declare? I'll take silence as a negative, thank you. Item 5, can we approve the minutes of the last meeting that are before us? Okay, again, I'm taking silence as approval. Okay, thank you. So can we move on to the agenda item proper? And obviously it's the time of year where we have the draft budget before us. This has been quite a protracted process, obviously, this year because of the extraordinary situation that the going through the pandemic has brought us into. I understand, and I'm sure we'll get confirmation of this, that we will receive the final settlement tomorrow. That's my understanding of the situation. So we still don't have the final settlement before us. And many of the proposals that have been put before Executive Board have been subject to consultation. So there is still quite a significant amount of work to be done in finally putting the reports together to move to the final budget setting meeting in February. Can I just take this opportunity of thanking Victoria and her team? I think they've done an extraordinary job in such difficult circumstances, and I know that you still will have a great deal more to do, but sincerely thank you for the work that you've done this far. Before I open it up, I would like to hand over to Councillor Lewis to see if there's any further comments that he would like to add at this stage.
Thank you, Leader. I almost pressed leave rather than unmute, which is, I think, all of us have felt like that during 2020 at some point. Just to add to what you said, Leader, and I would add my thanks to my comments about how hard officers have worked, not just to deal with the global pandemic, 2 lockdowns and all the associated events, but the timetable for setting our budget for 21-22 has remained as it does for every year. So that process has had to take place as well. And as this report sets out, there are some significant organisational change proposals as well in here. I think the couple of points I would add is, first of all, again, given the light of the year, this is a draft budget. It doesn't at this stage exactly balance. Fully acknowledge that when we come to February, we do have to produce a balanced budget in line with it. This budget doesn't exactly balance at this stage. Like you say, we're waiting for the settlement and other monies. The second point is, I think we were all very surprised in the spending statement that the Chancellor made, that money for adult social care that we thought we were receiving as grant. It turned out the Chancellor gave us the option of, withdrew money we thought we were receiving as grant from government, and gave us the option instead of raising additional council tax in the form of the adult social care precept. The proposed budget recognises that as a factor, but it doesn't state our final position on what we will do with that. We'll have to do further work on that to see what we do. But it is regretful that given the year that we know many of our residents have had, and also the pressure on the adult social care system, that the government felt that adding more pressure on residents to take pressure elsewhere off the system was a way forward. I'll leave my comments there, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to Councillor Carter? Do you have any comments? I'm sure you'll be reserving your position on
yes, and particularly so on this occasion, Councillor Blake, because it's more draft than it usually is at this time of year because of the situation. And as somebody once famously said, tomorrow is another day, and tomorrow seems to be going to be a very big day in all sorts of directions, not least the revenue support grant settlement announcement, which I'm pleased is coming tomorrow. I think there was some concern it might be delayed until the beginning of next week. And of course, we've got announcements on COVID restrictions. So it's difficult to ask precise questions, but I want to ask one or two. Within this paper, most of the savings that your administration have suggested are included up to press. Some of them, however, are still out to consultation. One that doesn't appear in these papers, and Councillor Lewis has touched upon it, is the fact you are going to reduce by some hundreds of thousands of pounds our support of neighbourhood networks in adult social care. That saving is not reflected in these papers. Do I take it, therefore, that that is not going ahead and that alternative sources of funding have been identified? And just to pick up Councillor Lewis's point about the option that the government have given us on council tax, nobody wants to see council tax go up unduly. But I do think, it's difficult to accept that on the one hand, the council is always saying we never have any options, we never have the ability to take decisions ourselves. But when it comes to being given an option, we complain about it, presumably because it's a painful set of options. But I'm afraid to say painful options are there for all of us and every level of government. So to be moaning that particular thing, I think, is a bit unfortunate. So I'd like a particular answer on that. I also, and this may seem minor to a lot of people, but I assure you it's not to most local communities, the issue of community committee funding. Now, we know in these papers that there is a 15% reduction on wellbeing funds built in, which no doubt opposition groups might or might not seek to reverse. But let's move on the presumption that they are going to be included. It becomes extremely important, therefore, for sensible financial planning reasons, that we find out now whether it's the intention of the council to claw back any underspends in wellbeing funds. And it's perfectly obvious, I think, why I'm saying that. Faced with reductions next year, community committees may be able to stave off some reductions they don't want to see by use of balances, which is something that the council in general itself does. But also what we don't want to see is unnecessary money being spent on things that are likely not to happen anyway because of COVID. So for the sake of getting a sensible way forward, an assurance on that would be extremely useful. I know that Councillor Cooper was challenged on this by community committee chairs at their recent meeting with her, and a non-committal answer was given. I wonder if you can give a more definite answer. And I'll come back on something else after that, if I may.
Okay, Councillor Lewis, do you want to pick up those items?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid on the last one, I will, as Councillor Carter predicted, be giving a non-committal answer. Clearly, we do value community committees. We were written to in the last few days by Councillor Cooper, indicating we were receiving more funds from the COVID related grant funding the council has received outside the normal settlement towards community committees. So I think that demonstrates our commitment to Councillor Carter's disappeared, to our community committees. But like I say, I'm afraid I'm going to have to still continue to be non-committal. In terms of the adult social care precept, like I say, it was we have taken the precept to raise money for adult social care in the past. It was an unexpected item, and we do need to consider our position on that. On neighbourhood networks, I believe the information has been released that we are again, as I referred to on community committees, releasing money associated with COVID towards neighbourhood networks. I believe that information has been released, and like I say, I come back to the point I made. This is a more draft budget than we'd expect. It has been an exceptional. It has been an exceptional year, but like I say, these are steps we're taking, and I hope we've covered some of the. I hope I've covered the issues you raised, Councillor Carter. Sorry, you disappeared. I don't know whether you heard my answer or not. I'm happy to repeat any of it.
I did hear. I was reading the papers, which of course we're able to get up on screen, as you. I hope you're aware.
Yeah. Okay. You wanted to come back on something else as well?
Not for the moment. I may come back in a moment.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Can I move on to Councillor Galton then, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm very interested in how this is being discussed. And as you can appreciate, we are, of course, reserving our position. The issue around Councillor Carter criticising the council for the issue around the precept. I have to remind Councillor Carter that the government is the one that announced this as billions of pounds of extra spending on social care, but they didn't actually mention in that announcement that actually it was an option for local authority to tax. It wasn't for money to actually be delivered from the centre and handed over. And I think it's only right that the council should take that taxation level seriously at this point. However, through the lack of certainty at this point about what the council is going to do, it puts these draft proposals, which are already quite vague in some areas, even more vague, because the assumptions so far are that the council will take the full precept. And if the council chooses not to, and to divide it up across a couple of years, then we will be facing even further cuts which aren't mentioned at all in this paper. And one of the things I will say is we really do need to perhaps look at the cross-departmental reviews, which are also included in the paper, and think, why has it taken a crisis like COVID to be doing some of this cross-departmental work so that we can actually ensure that the spending that we are doing as a council is as efficient and cost-effective and community-focused as possible? Because I think it's a shame that it's taken it till 2020 for this to happen, given that the document around a new way of working for local government was released by Tom Reardon and Councillor Wakefield several years ago, which advocated that kind of cross-departmental structure to add some kind of mechanism which would make sure that decisions that we did make were rounded decisions and that didn't cause undue harm. And unfortunately, some of the decisions that we're finding in this paper are that same kind of departmental, internally focused salami slicing, which reduces the service on offer to some of the citizens of Leeds to an absolute minimum, whilst other areas of the city get a higher level of service. And I really do think that we need to be looking at these proposals and listening to the councillors that are feeding back to you and the groups that are feeding back to you in terms of things like the bowling greens being cut by 50%, even though their value for future health and well-being is one which you would hope to be achieving 100% more each year, are short-sighted and counterproductive. And I look forward to this debate being taken further. But as you've said, the executive board isn't the place for that close analysis right now, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for us to do that between now and the council meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Lewis, I'm not sure if there's anything specific you want to pick up in that.
Reflecting on
reflection.
This is the 10th year we've had to make austerity savings. I would remind Councillor Galton that he was in government, cutting our funding for the first 5 of those. You might sigh, Stuart, but this is serious. This is serious stuff. And again, you know, if we had thought that these decisions were easy, I'm sure we'd have taken them years ago. And I think that reflects the seriousness of the position we're in. Again, it was a point both Councillor Carter and Councillor Galton made. Again, it reflects why some of these are more draft proposals. There are still a number of items out for consultation as well, and clearly we will be responding to the consultation and listening very carefully, as Councillor Galton suggested, to what the public are saying.
I would also add that, you know, going back over the years, we would never have had this level of scrutiny of the budget proposals so early. And I think that has been a development that that everyone should welcome, if I'm honest, even though the situation at the moment is so difficult. And one thing we know about consultation exercises, they very often throw up some really creative and useful ideas of ways of working, and it is a way of keeping in contact with different user groups around the city. I think, Councillor Carter, are you indicating coming now?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, just on that last point, you're right there, and it would be wrong to say that the budget process is not really helpful in the way that it gives time for all councillors and more particularly members of the public to be able to comment. And I should have thanked the finance department, indeed all officers, for the work they've put into this. But you know, I do have to remind you that it's only a couple of weeks since our accountants, Grant Thornton, effectively said that we were ill prepared as a council to cope with COVID because of our lack of reserves and debt position. And as we have the lowest level of reserves of any of the core cities. And please don't tell me that's because our services are better than theirs, because it simply isn't true. And on top of that, our indebtedness, you might like to know, Judith, that during your tenure as leader, our council borrowing has just topped £1 billion, and that is only the borrowing on which we have to pay on the capital programme rather, that we have to pay interest. So basically, every time a child is born in Leeds, it's born owing Leeds City Council £1,250, and that's only for the amount of money you have spent without the appropriate funding to go with it since you became leader of the council. So, you know, when I hear all the talk of austerity and cuts, I do think we need to look at the way you have run our finances in general. And as Stuart said, and for once I agree with him, there'll be more to debate about this in due course.
Thank you. I'm sure we're all looking forward to it already. Thank you, Councillor Carter. With those comments, can we approve the recommendations of the papers for item 6 and move on to item 7, which is the separate late paper on the update of the coronavirus situation. And again, this is another situation which is a really movable feast, as we know. Again, I do want to start by paying tribute to all council departments for the extraordinary effort that they have put in. And when you actually look at the extent of the work, the reach that we've had, the support that we've given to the public of Leeds, and the response from the public and from our partners, recognising the work that has been done by the council, I think is second to none. And I really do want to pay tribute to everyone for the effort that has been made. And this situation a year ago could not have been foreseen, and the way that the council has stepped up and really taken the rightful community leadership role has been exemplary in my view. We do need opportunities to reflect on just what we have achieved. We are very good at moving forward to dealing with the next situation, but actually I think more than any time, all of us need to be expressing our gratitude to the effort that has gone in. And I sincerely hope that that everyone does get the chance to recharge their batteries over the holiday period, because many people have not taken any leave, or their leave has been severely interrupted since the first case was identified in Leeds in early March earlier this year. So we are now in a position which we could only really hope for a few months ago, that we are in the process of delivering vaccines across the city. And I understand already over 2,000 people have been received their first injection of the 2. And already when you're out and about, you can hear people talking about people they know who have received an invitation to go to be vaccinated, which really does show how it is being taken forward. And our health colleagues are doing an extraordinary job helping to get the vaccine out. And of course, this vaccine is a particularly difficult vaccine to look after, and it needs very sensitive handling. So I think that makes the achievement even more extraordinary. So we look forward to rapid escalation of the doses of vaccine being delivered. Since we last met, of course, we've seen a real uptick in our localized tracing service, which we've all said all the way through, is, you know, the more local you can get this work, the better. So again, thank you to all of the work that's been done on the front line in this area, really working to gain the confidence of our communities at this time. So I think it's fair to say that there have been meetings today which will determine whether or not Leeds is going to move from the current Tier 3 status. And the only way it could go would be to go down to Tier 2. We've certainly put a submission in at the end of last week against the 5 criteria that the government have set around this, with a strong view from ourselves that we feel or felt, given the circumstances at the end of last week, that we were in a strong position to move forward. And we did share that intention with the other leaders across council and received their support for taking that forward. We're expecting to hear the results of the deliberations in London probably tomorrow morning. That is the most likely scenario. We have obviously in the past been expecting announcements to be made, and they have been delayed, so nothing is absolutely set in stone with the response to the virus as we know. But you know, obviously if we do move tiers, there will be a great deal of work to continue to do with those businesses that will be affected. But I haven't had chance to listen in to the Prime Minister's announcements today about their discussions about the Christmas period. From the headlines that have been coming through, it would appear they're not considering making any changes to the arrangements that they've announced, but they will be changing the messaging and offering stronger guidance to people out in our communities as to how they should operate over the Christmas period. We'll have to look at that in detail, but I just want to reassure all members that we will be doing everything we can, as we have throughout the crisis, to keep all members up to date with the latest information that we have. And I'm sure that we will be continuing that over the next 2 weeks with the holiday period coming up. So before I open it up, I don't know, Tom, if there's anything you want to add at this stage, but clearly the report reflects the enormous amount of work that happens day on day, and this is bringing it together for the update from the last month's worth of activity. But it really is an impressive compilation of the far-reaching work, and I haven't even talked about the extraordinary efforts that have been going on through Martin and Martin's team in terms of making sure that we're getting the financial support out to businesses as quickly as we possibly can, and so much more that we could touch on. Tom, if there's anything you would like to add at this point.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to say, just that we were. I think this has been the biggest test for the council, certainly in my time, and probably, arguably, since the war, in terms of you know, the city itself and the council. It's that, you know, the local authority concerned, and the reason that we've done so well is exactly what you've said, which is the tremendous effort from people on the ground and council officers and members, and the collaborative team spirit we have in the city. And that's borne out with the vaccine having gone out since, as you say, you know, since last Tuesday. We've got over 2,000. It'll be 3,000 by the end of today, I understand, and 20,000 by the end of the calendar year, people having had their first jab, which is the biggest thing that will make the biggest difference. We have huge amount of work going on through Victoria and her team on dealing with outbreaks, closing them down, making sure that they don't spread. The universities have worked incredibly well together to close down what was a doubling every few days within the student population. Within a matter of 3 weeks, it was reduced down to 15 cases per 100,000. Again, testament to that collaborative work. The £500 self-isolation payments have been rolling out in large numbers to people in the city. The business grants, as you say, 5,500 business grants have been allocated, and we've We're making sure that we get business grants allocated to those businesses who've had to close in December before Christmas, who've applied to us. So over 1,000 will get that as well. And then finally, just to cover, as you say, the tiering issue, just to reference the major amount of meetings that we had and the great respect and involvement and engagement that we had with the NHS partners. It is a very tight, a very finely balanced judgment about which tier we should be in, and we've made that clear in our submission. And we came down on the side of tier 2, rightly, I think, and safely. But clearly, there are things to balance, and it may be that we stay in tier 3. And if we do, then we just need to keep doing what we've been doing, because the reason we're down, the case numbers have gone down, is because communities of the city have been responding so well, and that's where we need to try and stay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Councillor Carter, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to first of all echo my thanks to all the staff in the council, but also in the NHS, but for the council for the moment. People have been putting in the extra mile now for months. And you're right, a break is needed. It's perfectly obvious, and the same affects our constituents. A lot of people now showing significant signs of stress, and the whole country needs a break, but it has to be done carefully and with proper consideration. Interesting that earlier this morning I heard part of PMQ's, Prime Minister's questions, and the Prime Minister actually singled out West Yorkshire and other northern areas for the way in which we performed in driving down the infections in our areas, as opposed to parts of London and indeed in Wales, where the whole thing's been verging on a catastrophe. I think there's recognition that a lot of very, very significant steps have been taken as best we can to control the virus, and thanks does need to go to the people of the city. Now, I really don't like to see this singling out of particular groups who have perhaps not obeyed the rules as they ought. The vast majority of people in Leeds have taken this extremely seriously. And I'm one of the people, as you know, and as you know, I also directly contacted 2 cabinet ministers supporting the stance that the council were taking on moving to tier 2. I think that the case may be slightly marginal, but you have to start wondering whether the cure is going to finish up being a lot worse than the disease. And people are showing all sorts of strain because of the position that not just the country, but half the world, it would appear, seems to be struggling with. And I think that people who choose to disobey and don't listen to the messages are being extremely, extremely foolish, because we do need to relax to some degree, but that won't work if people decide to go over the top. And I think the message has to be, and I think it's what the government is going to be saying now about the Christmas break, is that use your common sense. It is not time to throw open the doors and have a huge party. And if you do, there will be consequences. And the consequences won't only be to people's jobs and people's health who you may not know, but to your own family and your own loved ones. And so just be sensible, enjoy Christmas as best as possible, support people who are on their own, but don't over-egg the pudding, or we'll be back to square one, and nobody wants that, because the consequences of that, I think, just can't be dwelt upon, to be frank. It would be extremely depressing for us all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Galton, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. I won't add to the debate around tier 2 and tier 3 and guidance for people for what to take, because I also listened to Question Time today, and then Politics Live afterwards, and the different advice which is coming out of the different administrations across the country, but is being broadcast universally. I'm not sure is helping to get the message across. What I will do is concentrate perhaps on the bit which is the most hopeful for the general population, and that's around vaccination. One of the things that I did notice as a local councillor and a member of our local care partnership is that for the vaccination centres, there was a request that went out in terms of community transport to enable some of the prioritised groups of people to get to the vaccination centres in the first place. And I was just thinking, it didn't feel like it was as organised as it could be around the transportation element. And talking to some of our community transport providers, they weren't confident, for instance, that they had the correct insurance and the likes. And I'm just wondering if that issue could be taken up with the CCG, and maybe the council can offer something a little bit more enabling in that area. I am aware, for instance, that under the Clean Air Zone proposals for the money which is left behind, we are obviously enabling some of our taxi firms to have their drivers have free licensing for a year. And I just wondered if it was worth developing a partnership with those firms to enable that transportation for vaccination to go perhaps a little bit more smoothly. Thanks, Chair.
I don't know if Tom or Victoria want to comment. I mean, I think everyone is hopeful that the Oxford vaccine will be licensed by the end of the year, and I think that will help with accessibility of the different the locations where the vaccine can be administered, which will be helpful. I don't know if either of you want to answer specifically now, whether it's something you want to take away and have a look at.
I'm sure we can. Victoria might want to come in, but I'm sure we can take it away. I would say that this week we've got 3 primary care venues giving the vaccine out, and it's been very successful, rolling out really quickly. In the next few days we'll have another 6, and then we'll have all 19 in Leeds up and running next week. So it will, we'll be pretty well covered in the city. We will give the message back and ask the question that Councillor Galton has raised. As we get the thing ramping up even more in the new year with the larger vaccination site as well as the hospital site, then I think there is a very active piece of work to do about making sure that we have good public transport in place for people, and that's something that we're actively looking at as well. So getting people to and from these centres being able to have the vaccine is obviously crucial, and there will be a mobile service developed as well, particularly thinking of care homes, but that will be available in time for others too. So there is quite a major programme of thinking about all of these things, and I think it's probably important to just reflect on how it will build up very quickly, so that by mid-January we'll have major sites running right across the city, able to serve many, all the communities of the city. I don't know if Victoria wants to add anything to that.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Galton. I'd just add that I think it's absolutely right that this is a really key issue, and our role, partly as a council, is to ensure we absolutely get the best uptake of the vaccine in all the groups and communities, we need that, and do everything around creative ways and different ways of ensuring access. So part of that maybe will be community transport, but as Tom said, we really want to be able to take this out to where people are, as well as expecting them to come to vaccination centres. So as a council, I think that one of our key roles is working with NHS partners, not just to get the numbers, but to get those numbers in the right places and to make sure we reach all communities. So thank you. Your comments are very welcome. We'll take those away.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure I speak for everyone on the call that our plea to government is that the guidance that does come out for around Christmas and the period ahead is consistent. And I think the difficulty has been why there has been variation in responses. There have been inconsistencies in the guidance coming from different departments, different parts of government. And I just repeat again our plea that government really does start listening more to local government, and that they start to respond to us, work with us and respect us more in our ability to deliver the work that needs to be done and will be ongoing regardless of the vaccine for several months to come, I'm sure. So I think that's our collective plea, that it has been difficult to find a way forward, and some of the guidance coming forward that different organisations have had to respond to has been very late coming in the day, and has created quite a significant amount of extra trauma for people on the front line. But we'll obviously keep everyone informed as soon as we're aware of the decision that's been made. Normally it would go to the COVID-0 committee meeting tomorrow, chaired by the Prime Minister, and then I'm sure I hope we'll be informed directly as a local authority. Last time it was very unsatisfactory that we got the information from the website. We weren't informed in advance of it going into the public domain, which made our response really quite challenging. But thank you for the comments everyone has made in support of the work that is going on in the council and across the city, and let's make sure we do everything possible to enable people to keep doing that extraordinary work on behalf of all of the people who live and work in our great city. So with that, can we approve the recommendation of the paper? And then we're moving on to second late paper, for obvious reasons as well, which is the paper around the laying out the position in terms of the still ongoing negotiations around the Britain's exit from the European Union. We don't know yet exactly where those negotiations have reached. There are statements being made by both European representatives as well as government, suggesting that the discussions are continuing, are proving useful, albeit in a very tense and difficult situation. We're doing everything that you could expect of us to keep people informed, but quite frankly, I don't think we really have any more information at a local level than we had when we discussed the matters before. But we're keeping a very close contact with business, with our health communities, and all of the sectors who are being affected or who might be affected more as we reach the conclusion of the negotiations. Tom, I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add from your regional position. Clearly, we do have situations around our ports in to the east of Yorkshire that have been causing concern, but I don't know if there's anything at this point that you want to add to the report that's in front of us.
Just to say, Chair, that obviously the fact, as we've said before, the fact that we don't have a major port within our geographic boundary, and we don't have a major freight airport, it means that we aren't in the if you like, as much in the front line as other places in the country, particularly Kent, would be if there was not to be a deal struck. And our issues tend to be the ones more at a granular level in terms of the number of, helping people get settled status, of which, as the paper says, there's now 42,000 applications have led to just under 40,000 decisions. We've got all the work that's going on in engaging with the business community. And what I think we would say there, given the regional and local meetings that we've had, is that there is I think a concern, particularly for smaller businesses who have had a hard enough job dealing with COVID and haven't necessarily got the bandwidth at the moment to think about the full range of issues around Brexit, the issues around the more general ability of the public and the private sectors to respond after such a difficult year, as has been said, in terms of emergency planning is a challenge. But probably the main, I guess, concern that has been raised is around food, where what I would say, having talked to Asda in particular, is that I think in many ways that the COVID situation has given the supermarkets particularly a dry run at what might happen in terms of a no deal scenario. So I think they feel pretty well prepared actually for what happens next. The bigger issue will probably be a more gradual potential increase in food prices, which would obviously affect many people in the city significantly. But I would finish by just saying, obviously, we've always said there are opportunities that come from this process, and we are working actively with the core cities and central departments to think about the post deal opportunities for international trade in particular. We've had meetings with both Lille and Dortmund to talk about these issues, and we'll Leeds has always been an international city, and will, I'm sure, grab any opportunities that arise with both hands, and we'll be doing that with the business community, very much so.
Thank you, Tom. Andrew, would you like to comment?
Only really to say we shall find out in the next few days, I suspect, whether we've got a deal or not. And until we do know, there's little more to be said. I think Tom's resume there was extremely balanced, and he's right. There's some downsides and there's some opportunities, and Leeds needs to be prepared for both.
Thank you. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. What an opportune time for the council to cancel its food waste collection, given that the oven-ready deal has been overcooked. All I can say, Chair, is I hope to God we soon get some kind of clarity to allow people just to lead their lives with some kind of certainty, and for businesses to be able to make investments where they can with some kind of assuredness, other than a bunch of expressions of hope that we've seen worse than this and we'll come out on the other side. It's very serious, and the brevity of the report expresses just how much information we've got to go on in terms of planning for the future. And it is what it is. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Don't think there's anything more to add at this stage. We'll all be watching with great interest, obviously, what unfolds over the next few days. It is of such significance to all of us, so very important few days ahead. With those comments, can we approve the recommendations and move on to item 9, please? This is still under my portfolio. It's the lease agreement for the Leeds Media Centre. We are going to be looking at this below the line. I'm not sure, Martin, if there's anything particular that you'd like to raise at this point above the line.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Blake. I don't think there isn't a confidential appendix attached to this, as I understand it. I don't know whether Gerard.
Apologies, I thought that Gerard said there was, sorry. Apologies.
Yeah, I think it's two later items, Councillor Blake.
Right,
But
apologies for that, that's my...
just in terms of summary, so members consider a report in July 2019 and supported the investment of 1.6 million into the Leeds Media Centre to support its use as managed workspace with a focus on the creative and digital sectors. This funding was in part based on the principle of £800,000 coming from the ESIF funding and £500,000 of council funding being repaid by the Unity Property Services Limited, who would be the lead tenant for the premises. And now to move that project forward, this report seeks the principal agreement of the Executive Board to a peppercorn lease for a period of 15 years, with Unity repaying the £500,000 of our capital investment over the term of the lease via a separate agreement. But that's the essence of it, Councillor Blake.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Martin. Councillor Carter, any comments? Happy to support.
Yeah, very briefly. The only question I have is, have we properly assessed the corporate risk to the council, because we've got £500,000 invested here, and if Martin would rather deal with that below the line, I'm happy to wait until we do that.
Well, I think that the in principle answer, Councillor Carter, is that we would go through the same due diligence process in terms of Unity Property Services that we would for any organisation, and we put the appropriate checks and balances in place in terms of that investment, which ultimately is investment into a council asset that we are the freehold owner of.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry, Chair. So although we're clearly being extremely helpful in terms of keeping this moving forward, and I don't have a problem with that, we are not using any less stringent assessments of the risk to the council, are we?
No, that's correct, Councillor Carter.
Thank you.
Councillor Galton, any comments?
Sorry, Chair, I was looking at the papers. I note that this investment was enabled by significant European money, which we were able to access because we went into the transition period for 2 years. I note that in the last paper, we discussed Brexit and the government's response to it. I understand that their UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is meant to be replacing, or supposedly even better than, the European money we've had access to this year, that's not coming in until 2022. Are we able to bid for stuff before then, Chair?
Yes.
Martin?
Well, we'll be eligible to bid at the point that they open up that source of funding. I don't think it's been opened as yet, Councillor Blake. I mean, this funding is through the ESIF fund. It's in the final stages of the appraisal, and we're expecting that to be concluded any day. I think in the interim, the mechanisms will be things like the gain share through the combined authority. If there are any such proposals pending, us understanding how we can access the Shared Prosperity Fund in more detail.
Okay. Thanks. You're on mute, Councillor Galton. I'm seeing that you're nodding. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just saying, yes, it confirmed that there's nothing planned, nothing actually ready to deliver, nothing oven ready to help the regions from the government.
Apart from you, Stuart, you're oven ready.
Right. Can I take control of this discussion and move us forward to agreeing the recommendations of the paper? Thank you for your input. And can we now move on to the resources portfolio? Councillor Lewis, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just going to have to gather myself after Councillor Carter's comments. It's triggered all sorts of worrying images. My first paper is the Financial Health Monitoring month 7 of this year. As usual, this is a paper that we receive every month that sets out our financial position against the budget headlines, and as always, there is the wealth of information towards the end of the paper. I'm going to restrict myself in opening comments just to the recommendations, which are on page 2, leading into page 3. And the 2 significant recommendations that are here is that, first of all, that we release the reserve held within Merrion House, and the detail is set out in the paper later on, to contribute towards closing our COVID funding gap for this year. And the consequence of that is the recommendation in B that we have withdrawn our request for a capitalisation directive to the government. And this means that despite everything we've dealt with as a council this year, we can balance our budget using our own resources. There is a cost to the council in the years ahead from drawing down the Merrion House reserve. But again, we'd have to be clear that had we been successful in the capitalisation directive, there would have been repayment costs for the borrowing that incurred. So I think this is it is not a perfect situation, and I don't think anybody would pretend it would. It is, but we've quite clearly been able to balance this year's budget using our own resources, and I think that again is a good position for the council to be in. It means there is no longer any uncertainty about funding for this year's budget, and it means that we can continue to plan for next year's budget, again, like I say, without any additional uncertainty.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Carter, any comments?
Yeah, all's been said really. The only question around we need the 25 million reserve, which was reserved for a particular purpose, to balance the budget this year. My only question is this: Grant Thornton, our external auditors, certainly as of Monday, had not signed this off. Now, I'd like the good news now that they have signed it off. But if they haven't signed it off and they don't sign it off, what happens then?
Victoria, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Councillor Blake. The external auditors are actually having we've had a hot review of our accounts, and they need to send everything off to the head office just to get it signed off. The risk is minimum that it wouldn't be signed off, and that's been following discussions with external audit. If the very unlikely case was that they didn't sign it off, it would be classified as capital expenditure, and therefore we would do a switch. So we have got a plan B, but obviously we'd like it to be the accounting entries that we've put forward to Grant Thornton. So I don't see there to be a risk on the out-term position for the council. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Most of my concerns I've mentioned month on month at Executive Board, so I won't repeat myself again. On a more positive note, I'd just like to emphasise that the reason why we've been able to get towards a balanced position this year, given all of the roller coaster ride that we've had financially and the assurances from central government and expectations that have come across us, and even the things like the super inflation rate for PPE at the beginning of the year, we have actually managed to come out of it on the other side, by the looks of it, through our own local entrepreneurship. And if it wasn't for that kind of creativity at a local level, up and down the country, I would think the government would be in an even bigger mess in terms of bailing out local government. So I breathe a sigh of relief at this, but not at any great measure of reassurance. Thanks, Chair.
Councillors, any comments you'd like to make to wrap up the paper?
No, I think that was a compliment from Councillor Galton, and I shall take it as such and end on that positive note. Thank you, Leader.
Good. Thank you. Can we approve the recommendations of item 10 and move on to your next paper, item 11, please?
Thank you. I'm just opening the paper up. Item 11 is an asset management paper, Leader. It's relates to the site surrounding the arena on Clay Pit, on Clay Pit Lane, and the proposal is that we swap land that we currently own with land adjacent to the former Yorkshire Bank headquarters, which would be done at no net loss to the council and would give us options in the future to work with future owners of the Yorkshire Bank, former Yorkshire Bank building, in terms of bringing that forward for more complementary uses for the arena. I think again, it's the potential is great here, even though the proposal in the paper is a straightforward land swap, Leader. I don't know if Martin Farrington has anything to add to that, and I know we have a pink paper as well that comes with this report.
You like me to comment, Leader?
If there's anything you'd like to comment, Martin.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of the land swap that's outlined in the paper, Councillor Blake, is that the plans on page 223, we would exchange site A that we own, which would be subject to the suitable planning consent, and in return we would receive site C, and taken with site B that we own that's adjacent to site C, we would assemble a larger plot that could be brought forward for complementary uses to the arena, which is a proposal that we would then secure through the principles that are outlined in this paper. So that's the essence of it, and the detail is in the pinks, Councillor Blake.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin. Councillor Carter.
Yes, Chair. I'm not entirely happy with this, and I'll say more on the pink papers when we go into closed session. I mean, I understand entirely the rationale behind wanting to combine sites B and C, because they make a more compact and useful development plot. But we mustn't lose sight of the fact that plot A is in an extremely influential position in terms of the arena. And so I don't want to see us lose total control of site A and what may go on it, because it's all right saying that plots B and C will be complementary to the arena, but plot A needs to be complementary to the arena in some way, shape or form. And so when we move into the pink papers, I want some significant reassurance on that, and I'll leave it at that for the moment. But it's yeah, it's an interesting proposition, we'll put it like that.
Okay, so are you happy to wait till we go on to the pink to discuss?
I am, unless Martin wants to say anything particular in answer to that now.
I think my comment, Councillor Blake, would be the principle of development of those sites is outlined in the paper and were considerations at plans panel when the arena came forward. And there's a question for us in terms of if we want to affect the land swap, that would be dependent on a planning consent that the council would have to give if it was comfortable with it for any scheme proposal that came forward. So ultimately the land swap is conditional on the council giving a consent for a use that it's comfortable with.
Okay.
And that's precisely what concerns me. So I'll leave it until we go into the pink papers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton, do you want to add anything at this point?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, so then can we agree the recommendations and we'll discuss below the line and then move on to Councillor Heron's portfolio for item 12, the allocations plan, please.
As Executive Board members know, Leeds site allocations plan was adopted by full council on 10th of July 2019. Airborough Neighbourhood Development Forum then submitted a legal challenge in relation to 4 Greenbelt sites proposed for housing within their housing market characteristic area on 7 grounds. The High Court found that 3 grounds constituted errors of law within the Independent Inspector's report and has ordered that they be resolved. The 3 legal errors were legally deficient reasons in the Inspector's report justifying the release of the specific Greenbelt sites, and an error of fact in the Inspector's report relating to the increase in the supply of housing, mainly in the city centre during the process. None of the 3 grounds found that the City Council itself proceeded unlawfully or took a legally flawed approach to the site allocations plan. The court has ordered that the council send back 37 Greenbelt sites to the Secretary of State and the Planning Inspectorate. On all of the parts of the SAP, they remain adopted and are not affected by the remittal process. So the purpose of the report today then is to inform the Executive Board of the work undertaken since the legal judgments relating to the site allocations plan statutory challenge and the requirements for the remittal of the site allocations plan to the Secretary of State. Following an update of the housing land supply, it's proposed that these 37 Greenbelt sites are removed as allocations from the site allocations plan on the basis that Leeds now has sufficient land to meet its housing needs to 2028 without the need for Greenbelt's release. Executive Board is asked to note the resolution of Development Plans panel that met last Friday, asking us to approve the main modifications to the site allocations plan, which is set out in the lengthy appendices to the report, deleting the sites as allocations and leaving them in the Greenbelt, and for public consultation with Executive Board's approval to begin in early January. The consultation will be supported by a background paper and frequently asked questions that will help to guide local people through what is a complicated process. Thank you there. I'll await questions, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Heron. Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, thank you. I've no intention of going through the whole debate of this again, but suffice it to say, 37 sites that some of us argue ought not to be developed are now proposed to go back in the Greenbelt following a High Court judgment. Understand that entirely. So we, after 6 weeks, and I think, and I hope we'll see some fairly robust responses from the council to any developers who start to try and argue that these sites should be put back in the housing allocations. But I'm more concerned about 3 or 4 particular schemes, and I'm not going to single them out, but they're all schemes across the city with what I will call peculiarities. And I will mention one, which is the decision to incorporate the Greenbelt on the former City College site at Horsforth into the housing allocation, and the decision made by the planning committee to do that. Presuming this site goes back into the Greenbelt, the decision by the planning committee then falls, does it not? And there are a couple of others, and I'm not going to mention those by name, but I've already raised them with Martin Farrington and with Martin Elliott. One where there's a mixed use, and that's in Outer East, and another where it's specialist elderly people's accommodation, but they all have peculiarities and have had discussions between the council with developers. But I'll be asking in writing for clarity on those sites. But I would like an answer on the City College campus, because it's caused a great deal of concern, quite understandably, with local residents, that all of a sudden the site that on the surface had been returned to the green belt by a High Court judge was then judged to be suitable for housing by a plans panel of Leeds City Council. So what precisely is the status of that now?
Okay, shall I bring in Martin on this?
Yeah, well, thank you, Councillor Blake. I mean, David Feeney is joining the meeting, as is Martin
Okay.
Elliott. So perhaps from a Chief Planning Officer perspective, if David
Okay,
provides the answer to Councillor Carter.
I couldn't see them on my screen. So David, would you like to come in? Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Martin. Yes, just to clarify the position on this site, there's been a planning application submitted to the council, which has been considered under very special circumstances, and the application, which hasn't yet been determined on the Horsforth campus site, was an application for 100% affordable housing scheme, and such a proposal is allowed for in national planning guidance, and the application was sort of considered on the merits in terms of the exceptions test under the MPPF within that sort of particular case. So that application is working through the system. I understand that the application hasn't yet been determined. There are still discussions underway regarding design matters in relation to that site, but it is permitted for the council to consider applications under very special circumstances in relation to the merits of individual schemes, notwithstanding the process that we're working through in relation to the SAP remittal process. We are obliged to consider applications in relation to such schemes that are in front of us. So I hope that helps, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carter, do you want to come back?
Yes, I mean, I understand all of that, but it still doesn't answer the direct question. After the 6 weeks, if we submit to the Secretary of State a view that these sites should go back into the green belt, does that then stop the plans panel from taking a decision on that planning application? You follow me?
Yeah, I can respond, Chair, if that would be helpful.
Yes, please.
My understanding is it wouldn't fall because the application has been considered on its merits in relation to the very special circumstances, but it would not fall as a decision at that point.
I think you're getting into an almighty mess with this. It seems an extreme, Chair, it seems a very peculiar thing to me to be advertising for general public comment sites going back into the green belt. That's the premise. And in point of fact, what Mr. Feeney is saying is, given the behaviour of the plans panel on the application they have already seen, that whatever the public say is irrelevant.
Well, presumably you're following planning guidance, David.
Yes, on this point, Chair, there are two processes underway in parallel. There's a plan making process, which is described in the report in relation to the remittal of the 37 sites. And in parallel with that, we've received a planning application, which is being looked at through the Council's responsibilities for decision taking. So we are obliged to consider proposals which are in front of us. And in terms of this particular application, as set out in the report that went to the plans panel, the National Planning Framework does allow for this form of development. So that has been set out in the report, and the principle has been accepted through that panel. The matters that are outstanding now relate to issues in relation to design rather than the principle of the development.
Okay, but perhaps we could have that explanation in writing, David.
We can do that.
You know,
Yeah.
just getting that so it's very clear to members exactly how the planning process works in these particular circumstances. That would be helpful.
That's fine, Chair. We can do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Yes, thanks, Chair. A couple of areas, really. First of all, it's very welcome news that the land which is, sorry, the development land which has gone back into the green belt is now confirmed as the council's preferred option. But it was, I have to say, a little bit of a shock to those of us who'd spent so long having to fight for that outcome to be achieved, that the council so very easily succumbed to agreeing with what many local communities had been advocating for so long, and which the council had discounted for just as long. And it raises two questions for me. And the first one is, one of the reasons why the council feels that it's able to do so is because of the amount of development which has occurred, some of which is on sites that the council identified for development, but a lot of which are actually on sites which weren't on our allocation plan because they already had buildings on them, and those have been demolished and then rebuilt to provide housing. And that means that the profile of the housing which has been achieved so far, which has enabled the council to be far more relaxed about the green belt, is very city centre based. Some of it is student accommodation. And if it's student accommodation, it means that no affordable housing is associated with that development. And if it's in the city centre housing development, then only 7% of what is produced is affordable housing. And more often than not, that isn't actually provided on site. It is given to the council as a commuted sum. And I believe that 6 of such developments have delivered around about £3.8 million worth. But that affordable housing can only be delivered in the area where the original development is delivered. So with the expectation that the council is relying on much more windfall development to deliver its housing targets, what plans have been put in place to enable the wider city to enjoy new affordable housing to be delivered in their areas in the absence of the likelihood of developers providing it as part of their 15% contribution? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, Chair, has the council become so relaxed about defending its greenbelt housing growth sites due to the portent of the planning for the future changes that the government is bringing in, where the government will be taking away spatial powers from local authorities and directing them more centrally from Westminster? And if that is the case, and you're expecting to get further direction from the government on this, what do you think about the status of our green belt, given the announcement this week that the government is to change its housing growth algorithms to be focused more on the biggest 20 cities in the country, as opposed to where it was originally, which was the rolling fields of the southeast and southwest, and what impact that could have on us and our housing targets and planning? Thanks, Chair.
There's quite a lot in that, and obviously it's a changing situation on again, as many things are at this moment in time. I don't know if Martin, if you'd like to come in at this point, or David?
I'll make a start, Councillor.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I was looking at Mark. We've got Martin Elliott on the call as well. Martin, sorry, too many Martins. Yep, you go first. Yep.
I'll go first, and then
yeah, sure.
Martin can provide further detail. So in terms of the affordable housing point, Councillor Galton, you're right that the affordable housing level is 7% in our policy. It rises to 35% in some of the outlying parts of the city. It is the case that in terms of how we deliver that affordable housing, we are in a good place in terms of some of the developers in the city centre at the moment. You may be aware that the Guinness Partnership as an affordable housing provider acquired the Evans Halshaw site, and we're working closely with them in terms of the Brownfield Housing Fund for the delivery of 311 affordable houses, which should start next year. You probably also recall that we are bringing forward our own land to deliver affordable housing in the city centre. So 2 sites that are due to go into planning imminently is St Cecilia Street, which is adjacent to Quarry House and the development that's taking place there, and close by the Yorkshire Ryder site, and combined they will deliver a further 120 affordable housing units. And what we will be able to do, picking up on the 3.8 million of commuted sums that you outlined, is apply those commuted sums to schemes like that will enable them to go from an 80% affordable rent to a social rent. So in terms of increasing the affordability of those homes close to the city centre. And then moving forward from there, Clarion Housing Association have recently bought the City Reach site on Kirkstall Road. And as the largest housing association in the country, they are keen to bring that scheme forward with a level of affordable housing that is much more than the 7% policy compliant position. And they're looking initially to try and achieve above 30% affordable housing on that site. And it's a site that will be able to sustain quite a dense form of development. So whilst the scheme hasn't come forward yet, that would be quite a sizable number of affordable units. So I think you're right in your general point about 7% being lower in the city centre, but I think we can balance that against the opportunities that we face with some of the housing association interest in the form of Clarion Housing, Guinness Partnership, and our own activity that we're bringing forward in the city centre. In terms of the algorithm point, Councillor Galton, you're right that that was announced through a press release from MHCLG through the Secretary of State, by the Secretary of State this morning. At the time that this meeting started, there was no further detail that we'd received on that, but I'm happy to see if Martin can add anything.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Leader. Just to clarify in terms of the portfolio of housing opportunities within Leeds for executive board members, this means that between now and up to 2028, which is the end of the SAP plan period, we've got just over 20,000 homes within the city centre and the inner area. But we do have 15,000 homes that are within the outer areas of Leeds, and they will deliver between 15 and 35% affordable housing. So there still remains a range of different opportunities within the City Council. And in terms of the planning white paper, the council did send a detailed response to MHCLG on those proposals, but as yet, Councillor, there's been no further detail on what those proposals mean. And within the plan making side of things within the council, that is a legal statutory process, and it can't be preempted by what might be within national guidance. We are limited and bound by what is currently within statutory guidance.
Thank you. I feel it would be a useful exercise if we went through the changes in that guidance over the last several years in terms of the numbers. I think that I'd find that a very helpful exercise actually in terms of what we've been expected to do as a city, to be quite frank. And I think the idea that this has all been down to local activity needs to be really blown out of the water once and for all, if I can be so bold. Councillor Carter, do you want to come back in before I bring Councillor Mulheron in?
Yes, I do. If you visit the Ministry of Housing and Local Government website, you will see the announcement from the Secretary of State, which Councillor Galton only partially referred to. It runs for some number of paragraphs, and it particularly, and perhaps one of the most interesting, is a reset of the calculations the government does for support for affordable housing being skewed towards indeed housing initiatives skewed between London and the southeast and the north, and it proposes to alter that skewing to give more support to the 20 large cities, of which Leeds is one, and it's set out in the statement for all to read. And it would be useful, I think, for that to be. I've got a copy, but it would be useful, I think, for all members to read it, because it's about a lot more than Councillor Galton was intimating. It fascinates me that we've now got this sudden interest in planning from Councillor Galton, who seems to have confused the consultation on this particular matter with the consultation that has yet to be reported back on planning delivery, spatial strategy, and the rest of it. They're two separate things. But I suspect, indeed, I think it's highly likely that today or tomorrow there will be further clarity with ministerial statements on housing numbers. And of course, as you're well aware, the government's current housing methodology suggests a much lower housing number for Leeds than the council's original plan or its revised plan. And my understanding is the council made submissions, and I've seen a copy, so I know it's correct, pointing out to the government that their algorithm doesn't take into account economic growth. So if those suggestions, if that's been taken on board by the government, then you will see their figure, I suspect, rise. I'm sure you follow what I mean. I mean, we all along, you've justified your figures on statistics around economic growth, which a lot of us have disputed. The economic growth figure is now obviously substantially less, but nevertheless still there. And certainly the council, in its submission, which was not sent, by the way, by the development plan panel, but by officers presumably talking to Councillor Mulheron, made particular reference to the need for the government's algorithm to take into account economic growth. And if that's what's happened, then the numbers, the government numbers, will go up. So we shall see, I think, when the minister makes a statement in the House.
And of course, this is all relative to what the work they're doing nationally implies for all other areas and the changes that it brings right across the country. Councillor Mulheron, would you like to wrap up this item, please, in the best way you can at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure this isn't the final bit of the debate that we'll be having on this, but I think that was a very valiant effort from Councillor Carter to shift responsibility from the government to Leeds to Council. What Robert Jerrick announced today was another amendment to the government's intended standard methodology for housing, which suggests that the top 20 cities and the north will be levelled up by an algorithm working in favour of more housing in these areas, in favour of these areas as opposed to Tory shires and the south east of the country. There's no detail as yet, as Martin said, about whether these areas will be deliberately skewed or simply reflect the populations that we have. But it's the 4th time in 10 years that the government has fundamentally changed the method for calculating local housing needs, which is not conducive to long-term strategic planning, and has also made it more difficult for the council to set numbers and find sites to deliver them. So I don't think we'll be taking any lectures from Councillor Carter or his government, although we do wait with great interest to see what Robert Jenrick's proposals actually mean for us.
Thank you. And thank you for that summary. Can we agree the recommendations, please, for this paper? Can I just give notice that if we are still carrying on with the agenda at 3 o'clock, that we take a comfort break at 3 o'clock for 5 minutes? We do still have some substantial items on the agenda to get through. Moving on to your next item, Councillor Heron, on Morley, could I take this opportunity to welcome Gerald Jennings, who has gone above and beyond and sat through the Executive Board meeting this far. So it's great to see you on the call, Gerald. Obviously missed meeting you in person over the last few months, but I know you've been very active in many areas as normal. So can I just thank you for coming on the call for this item in your role as chair. I think if I could hand over to Councillor Mulheron though to introduce the paper, and then she'll hand over to you for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In late 2019, Morley was selected by the government as one of 100 towns across England to be eligible for investments of up to £25 million from the New Town Fund programme. In March 2020, a report was presented to Executive Board outlining an approach to developing a town investment plan and the boundary of the area that would be covered by that. We've established a town deal board to oversee the work, to develop an ambitious and visionary bid to present to the government's Towns Fund, support a programme of capital regeneration projects in Morley. These projects have the potential to deliver major inclusive growth developments, benefits for the town and the wider local economy. And I'm delighted that we're joined today, as the leader's already said, by the independent chair of the Morley Town Deal Board, Gerald Jennings. Before I hand over, Executive Board is asked to note the content of the report, to agree the emerging vision for a town investment plan in Morley and the priority objectives of the funding programme that's listed in it. It's also requested that the decision is exempt from calling because we have very tight government deadlines to meet for submitting that plan. And then if it's okay for me to do so, Chair, if I can hand over to Gerald to add to that introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Councillor Blake and Councillor Mulheron, and good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to let me say a few words for a few minutes. I've actually enjoyed the last hour and a half, Councillor Blake, listening in. It's been fascinating. I was appointed to the Morley Town Deal Board in September, and at our first board meeting, I was asked to be chair. And I was honoured to be asked, and I was duly elected as chair on the 29th of September, just shy of 3 months ago. The board have moved very quickly, I think it's fair to say, to discuss the themes, the objectives, and the key strategic priorities for Morley, based on the economic baseline research carried out by Mock MacDonald, and I think there's a paper that you've all seen relating to that work. We've had to act with some pace in progressing our thoughts and our discussions, given the timescale and the need to submit the town investment plan to government by the 31st of January next year. We have been, and I just would like to pay compliment actually, we have been very ably advised by the council officers, and they've done an excellent job actually. I think they've gone over and above, as you referred to earlier on, Councillor Blake. So my thanks to them for the work to date, actually. Progress to date includes developing a draft vision for Morley. We have a new brand and a new logo for the town, which we'll be going public with shortly. And whilst that is new and it is different, it still does reflect the heritage of Morley and its inherent strengths. Alongside that, we've developed towards a draft final town investment plan, which includes key themes, and I think as noted in the report, around health and well-being, around climate emergency, around connectivity in its wider context, and particularly around skills and education and placemaking, not just in the town centre, but on the outskirts of the town, and indeed throughout the whole geography of the town investment plan. And just in terms of the geography, I'd just like to say I thought it was very insightful in the summer of this year, before I actually joined the board, to extend the boundary of the town investment plan to include 3 of the major economic assets at Capitol Park, at White Rose Office Park, and at White Rose Shopping Centre. I think that was really very helpful in putting our thoughts together. And as a consequence of that, I've had some very positive discussions with the likes of David Aspin at the Office Park, and more recently, indeed yesterday, with Sir Bob Murray at Capitol Park. And both White Rose Office Park and Capitol Park have ambitious plans to extend and develop out. And both Sir Bob and David Aspin are really enthusiastic about joining what we intend and what we're trying to do at Morley, and they want to be an inherent and integral part of our future. And I think that's really plays into the strength of what we're trying to achieve. And one idea that we've had as a result of that, and as a result of speaking to some key education providers, particularly the Luminate Education Group, Leeds City College, is how we might establish a Morley Skills partnership. Both Munro Kay, David Aspin, and Sir Bob Murray would like to be a part of that. The board are very confident that we are working towards what will be a compelling town investment plan and rebase Morley and make it fit for the future over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years and beyond. And we believe we're building a genuine consensus and collaboration. The public consultation has been, I think, exemplary. In fact, we had over 1,500 responses from the public in terms of positive contributions, albeit there would have been 1 or 2 negative ones in that 1,500, but the vast majority have been positive and have validated the themes and the objectives that the board have been working to. And I think we're in good shape to submit a plan by the end of January 2020. And I continue to welcome the council's support for what we're trying to achieve in Morley for its future. Thank you, Councillor Blake.
Thank you for that very interesting summary, Gerald. Really look forward to talking some more about this and the whole approach. And you've obviously attracting some really quite significant people into the mix. So thank you for that. Councillor Carter isn't on his screen at the moment. I'll go to Councillor Galton if you'd like to make any comment first, Councillor Galton.
Yes, thanks, Chair. This is a real good news story for Morley, and the paper outlines some really exciting opportunities that are being made available to the town. And it's really good to see someone as someone with such a good track record of effectively bringing together the public and private sectors as Gerald Jennings chairing the board. So I'm very encouraged by this paper. It's bittersweet though, because there is a shadow over it in terms of how you end up benefiting from the town's fund, where it's effectively a ministerial lottery. And it would be really nice to see this level of focus being delivered a little bit more universally across most of the towns that we have in our area that need some help. And hopefully this can end up being a model which can then deliver significant and multiple benefits to other parts. So as somebody from a town who isn't going to benefit from 25 million quid, and all of the stuff that's mentioned in this paper, which would go down great in any community. I wish you all the luck in the world, and I look forward to a time when that level of funding could be potentially multiplied. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carter, sorry, you weren't on the screen when I...
No, sorry.
It's okay.
Well, again, it's great news, and we shouldn't be mealy-mouthed about it. Of course, we'd love to see this sort of initiative rolled out into all the towns that make up Leeds, instead of everything going to the city centre. The government have set up this scheme, I think, specifically because so many members of Parliament representing, shall we call them, outer areas, have said, you know, we have economies that could be really boosted and local towns that could be really boosted with a scheme like this. So I'm delighted that, absolutely delighted that the people of Morley have come together. I mean, this and the whole purpose of these schemes is that the people of Morley, or indeed the people of wherever else that are lucky enough to get one of these packages in the future, and there will be ones in the future, they are the ones who shape and influence what happens. And this document is extremely encouraging in that respect. And I've had, as you would expect, discussions with elected representatives from the area who are very, very positive about the way it's progressing, Gerald. You'll be pleased to know that, because as these schemes are rolled out, Morley has the opportunity of being a major flagship for the government's programme, and the more success it has, the better, because we can learn from it and hopefully get more of these schemes in more of our towns around Leeds, and that's certainly the intention.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Harron, would you like to draw the discussion to a close, please? Thanks.
Thank you. Just think it's very interesting to hear the comments from Councillor Coulson and Councillor Carter, and just also note Councillor Carter's assurance that there'll be more such schemes rolled out by his government in the future, recognising that they represent outer areas. So maybe Stuart, who knows, Rothwell may be lucky enough to be selected by the Minister next time. But in the meantime, really just want to welcome the investment in the Leeds district that is going to be coming to Morley. Thank Gerald and the Morley Town Deal Board and the officers that are supporting it for the work that they're doing, and look forward hopefully to a successful submission from the Town Investment Plan.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Can I just thank you again, Gerald, for giving us your time. You're very welcome to stay with us, but we will understand if you do have other things to go on to. But all the best wishes for the season coming up. So can
Thank you.
Can I ask members to approve the recommendations of item 13? And I think we can move on to item 14 now before we have a break at a very brief break at 3 o'clock. So we're moving on to your next paper, Councillor Heron, the Connecting Leeds paper, and I'm very pleased that Nigel Foster has been able to join us on the call today. So thank you for coming on, Nigel, and for your patience waiting for your item to come around. I'll hand over to Councillor Heron in the same way and ask her to introduce the paper, and then we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to present the draft consultation paper for Connecting Leeds Transport Strategy to Executive Board today, ahead of the public consultation and engagement exercise to be undertaken. And an update was previously provided to Executive Board in January 2020. The consultation draft outlines the key challenges and opportunities facing the city, our big moves, and the huge challenge we face in meeting our carbon reduction targets for 2030 in order to achieve our citywide vision. The importance of this strategy cannot be overstated. It's integral to the delivery of our inclusive growth and health and wellbeing strategies and our action to tackle the climate emergency. It sets out our ambition to create a better connected city where people have a greater choice of how they can travel in low carbon ways in a city where you don't need a car, with a vision that no one is killed or seriously injured on our roads by 2040, as we set out to achieve a healthier, greener and more prosperous Leeds. Like you, Chair, I'm very pleased to welcome Nigel Foster, particularly as I understand you had some technical issues earlier in the day, so it's great that you're able to join us. Nigel chairs the expert panel that supports the work we do to draft the transport strategy for Leeds. And if it's okay with you, Chair, is it okay for me to introduce Nigel to you?
Yes, please do. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councillor Blake, Councillor Mulheron. Thank you for kind words on the introduction. I was asked to say just a few words about the Connecting Leeds panel, the work that it's been doing and the review that it's undertaken recently of the draft transport strategy for Leeds, which Councillor Mulheron mentioned. For those of you, many people on the executive board actually attend the panel meetings, but for those of you who aren't familiar with the panel, it comprises a range of experienced people and senior people from across the country. And they bring with them a wide range of different experiences in both transport, mobility, and in placemaking. And they include people who are engaged in the local communities within Leeds, such as Mary Naylor and Jagdeep Pasan. But it's also got very senior operating people, such as Rob McIntosh, who is the Managing Director for the Eastern Region at Network Rail. And also people who are in the academic community, such as Greg Marsden, who is the lead academic for the Decarbonate programme that's been funded by government, that's bringing together researchers from the University of Leeds and Lancaster in principle, but with other institutions to look at changes in mobility and transport to achieve the low carbon and net zero ambitions that not just Leeds have, but many places across the UK, but also in line with the government's policy on climate change. The panel's been now in existence for about 4 years, and it's done a whole range of activities with the council and really supporting the Gary Bartlett and his team that have been developing not just the strategy but delivering the LIPTIP programme. And the panel initially was set up to help support the LIPTIP programme, make sure we could secure that money of around 174 million, and importantly recognising that that's also leveraged in quite significant investment from other organisations, including the private sector. And it reviewed the projects and programs and the risks associated with that, because actually it was under a very tight delivery period, and that I think has been successful in changing Leeds. We've not necessarily experienced some of the benefits because as some of those programs have been implemented, we've been in this period of the COVID pandemic. It's also reviewed specific challenges around future mobility and also around the station. And these have all contributed to the transport strategy that Councillor Mulheron outlined. In its review of the transport strategy, the panel was very positive about it. And I think it felt it was ambitious and was setting a unique position for Leeds in comparison to many other cities in terms of that level of ambition and how it was integrated, in particular, I think as Councillor Mulheron said, with the plans for inclusive growth, the ambitions around climate change, and also how it was going to contribute to improving health and well-being. And it's been working with the other organisations that have been set up in the city, such as the Climate Commission and the Extended Inclusive Growth Partnership, to make sure that those policies are properly integrated with the policies that are being developed elsewhere in the council and in the city. I think it was also complimentary about how the council has responded to, in the short term, the immediate term, to the COVID pandemic and some of the policies that it's implemented, particularly around walking and cycling in the city, which I think it found being very encouraging, and certainly has been used by one of the panel members, who's the head of Sustrans in the north of England, in their work in other cities. So I think there's some very strong examples that the city have been developing, both within the strategy but also within its active policies on the ground. And there was strong support also for the comprehensive programme of engagement. It's one of the best. I've heard a lot, and I like Gerald, have been on the call and heard, it's been a very interesting debate. But one of the things I've heard on the call, and this is exemplified by the work as part of the panel and also as part of the Council's development of the transport strategies, it's engagement and communication during the Connecting Leeds programme. I can say from all of my experience that is one of the best engagement and consultation programmes that I have seen in transport, both the breadth and reach of the engagement, but also the amount of people that have actually engaged and commented and contributed to the development of this draft strategy. And now, as Councillor Mulheron has said, we are going out for further engagement, which the panel is very keen to support the council on, and has made offers as individuals and as a group to do that. In wrapping up, I think it's worth just noting that the panel did identify some areas that need some further work and strengthening, and I think that is recognised by the council's transport team and also the wider city development department, and these aren't by any means failings at all. These are just about timing and how they can be brought forward to strengthen the council's overall plan. One is about how it works on the delivery plan, that will follow from the transport strategy, because actually it's fine having a strategy, but you need to implement it, because it's that change that will make the difference. So there's further work to be done on the delivery plan. I'm confident about that, given the approach that's been taken under LIPTIP, because I think that's been a very successful programme in a very tight period. So I think that's certainly critical, and along with that would be funding, and then two other areas which I think need further work, and I think we all recognise that, and it is, as Councillor Blake has said on some of the other items, still a bit of a moving feast, and that is around strengthening the climate change action plan around transport, because I think transport is a major contributor to carbon emissions. But government is still moving in terms of its thinking about that, and is accelerating itself some of its own policies. So I think that's a positive thing. So I think we can take advantage of that. And then a bit further work on the impact of the digital economy, I think, which has perhaps surprised us a little bit in terms of how that has affected the world of work, but also affected the retail and service economy in terms of the number of deliveries that are being made and the travel and mobility choices that people are making. And some of those are quite fundamental. So we want to make sure we get that right. So one of the advice from the panel was, let's make sure that the transport strategy is flexible. And if that's okay, I'll leave it there, Councillor Blake.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Councillor Carter if there's any comments to make.
Just a couple. I had a briefing last week with WICA for their transport vision that goes to 2040. Now we have this plan, which doesn't go as far into the distance as that. And I'd like to know how these two marry up, if indeed they do. Because as regards climate change and achieving our carbon emissions targets, we seem to now have 5 different targets for different things, which may, of course, be perfectly sensible if they all progress one from another and join up. But we've got 2030, we've got 2035, we've got 2008, We've got 2040 and 2050. And look at comparing these two documents, the one from Wyker and the one from Leeds. They seem to be at cross purposes in some places. I won't go on in detail because these are for consultation and we'll see what gets fed back. But I do worry that we seem to be ploughing on regardless. And a lot of the statistics we're using are based on pre-COVID and don't seem to accept that there is going to be a period of time to get back to some level of normal and maybe back to the base figures that have been used for these calculations. So yes, we're going to consultation and see what gets said, but I would like some reassurance about how joined up the Leeds strategy and the West Yorkshire strategy is. Because when we move to a mayoral authority in May, the mayor will have a lot of the powers and the money more particularly that relate to the proposals in the Leeds plan. And as I've always predicted, be careful what you wish for. It won't necessarily be a smoother ride in terms of integrating the views of Leeds and the views of a newly empowered Wyker with a mayor.
Councillor Harron, do you want to come back on that? Obviously, there was a great deal of debate at the beginning in terms of the targets around climate emergency. It was well recognised there were different strategies in place, and that's why there are some differences out there. I don't think it's anything new at all.
Thank you. No, when we declared our climate emergency in 2019 and we set our date for 2030, it was based on scientific evidence-led data and information and advice from the Leeds Climate Commission, clearly relying on expert advice there in terms of the work that we needed to do. And we, as you know, then adopted our roadmap for delivering against those targets based on the roadmap set out by the Climate Commission. So Wyker subsequently declared their climate emergency and set a different target date, 2038. Again, they are working again to measure that against scientific evidence. They've been getting advice on how they will do that. Of course, our work plays an important contribution towards the overall West Yorkshire delivery. And of course, then we know that the government set a target date of 2050, which doesn't really seem to have the same sort of scientific evidence base that the local and regional measures do in terms of being able to deliver meaningfully to keep carbon reduction down within the limits set out in the Paris Agreement. So clearly across West Yorkshire we work very closely together, both the combined authority and neighbouring authority colleagues, and that's the only thing you can do with transport, because clearly people don't stop at the Leeds boundary. They move fluidly across from Wakefield, from Bradford, Kirkleeds, Leeds obviously being the main employment hub and the driver of the regional economy, plays the most possibly significant role in achieving that across not only our own districts but across West Yorkshire. And then if we look at mass transit and the need to be able to move large numbers of people around effectively in a low carbon way, then we are very heavily dependent on West Yorkshire and an incoming mayor to help us to deliver our ambitions around mass transit in particular. But in the meantime, we're not resting on letting anybody else do the work for us. Clearly, we're not seeing that happening from national governments, although they have brought forward the date by which petrol and diesel engine vehicles will stop being sold. What we are trying to do is what we can do locally, because we're very conscious that this is a climate emergency. It's not a climate, do it when you feel like it. This is something we are very conscious we need to be taking action on now and not deferring to a later date. And we know that obviously most kind of powerfully locally from the impacts on our city the Boxing Day floods in 2015, we've seen very painfully here in Leeds what the impact of climate change is. So the report that's before you today makes it very, very clear that our ambitions are going to be very challenging to meet. We've been open and honest about that, and we're asking the public to give us their feedback, not only in terms of the measures we're prepared to take, but also if they have other ideas, suggestions that they would like us to consider. So I just really leave it at that, I think, at this point. I'm sure maybe other questions and comments before we move on.
Thank you. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. I'll start off positively. As a document, it reads really well. And as a set of principles, it's really engaging. Yeah. And I think it highlights the priorities that not just the council, but the people of Leeds have in terms of how they'd like to move about the city. So there's the positives. The issue is for us, and this is a perennial issue for us, how do we make people feel that this document is actually owned by them? And basically that will be by us demonstrating that it will be something meaningful to them. And that will be about delivery. And this is where I get worried, because Nigel Foster just mentioned how successful the Leeds Integrated Transport Plan was. And I can assure you, from outside of the perspective of a highways officer and a transport consultant, the delivery of that programme is not successful, especially with the amount of projects which aren't going to actually reach completion or simply didn't get off the drawing board. And if we're talking about taking forward things like active travel, we need to make sure that they're not just amendments on a document. So for instance, I'll give you an example. There's a scheme going through my ward. It's worth 11 million quid. And it's supposed to be delivering cycle and bus lanes to enable people to get in and out of Leeds better through my area. However, the whole calculation about whether or not to have a length of cycle and bus lane is based on how quick it can make a bus go. It's not based on how safe it makes a cyclist feel. And we haven't yet found a measurement to do that. And if we're really going to have that proper integration of transport modes in our planning, we need to take both things as seriously as each other and not just see things as infrastructural investment programs. They're actually more than just concrete and tarmac to be delivered. They are enabling people to live different lives. And one of the things I'd like to see going forward is how we enable the public to engage with this document by talking about 15-minute neighbourhoods, which will make it far more real to them and their lives and where they live. So I look forward to it being developed. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Mulheron, do you want to come back? And I think Nigel wants to comment as well.
Thank you. Yes, sorry for the slight interruption. I had to let the kids in just ride home from school, so I was listening the whole time. Just in response to Councillor Galton's comments around delivery, first of all, I'd say it's really important to note that the LIPTIC programme was over-programmed, and that was deliberate. So we have now got a number of schemes which will be ready to deliver if we can access further funding, and we're seeking further funding opportunities to do some of that work. And it has enabled us, for instance, to be able to respond to other schemes of funding that the government has announced at short notice quite quickly by having schemes that were ready to be delivered. And I don't think we should be apologising for that. The other thing then I'd just like to say in terms of what you're referring to as 15-minute neighbourhoods, some referred to as 20-minute neighbourhoods, might be more realistic in some of our communities, where people can walk, cycle or access public transport to meet their daily needs within a 20-minute journey from their homes. And that is something that we are looking at through the local plan review, and building into our update of the local plan in line with our response to the climate emergency as well. So I think just those points probably, Chair, to respond to Councillor.
Thank you. Nigel, would you like to briefly comment?
Just a couple of quick points. I think that some of the points that Councillor Galton has made, I think, are very valid, and I think the panel would agree with them that we do need to make sure that we engage, and that's the purpose of, I think, as Councillor Mulheron outlined, that the purpose of the engagement and consultation next year is very much to listen to the public. It's very much determined about what will be the sorts of behaviours and mobility that they need to carry out their lives, as they said, and very much whether it's 15-minute, 20-minute or a 30-minute neighbourhood. We're trying to make sure that these are developed around the communities within Leeds, not just around the city centre. And some of the discussions with the extended inclusive growth partnership is very much about that. And I know that Gerald's gone, but certainly places like Morley or Rothwell or Horsforth in Leeds are all places that we want to make sure that are easily accessible and have the right level of mobility. And just a point that Councillor Carter made, on the panel, we have the chair of the Transport Committee at the Combined Authority, we have the Managing Director, and we have some of the senior officers attend the panel meetings, and it's very much intended to align the strategy for Leeds with the strategy for West Yorkshire, and they're going out with their connectivity plans in the new year as well.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask, when we did the big conversation, do you remember the transport conversation first time round, we involved community committees in the consultation. Can I ask that we're doing the same again? I think it's really important that all members are engaged in the consultation in that way. Yes, no, Councillor Heron's nodding, so take that as a yes.
And also,
okay.
Councillor Blake also with business as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And can I just say an enormous thank you, Nigel, for coming on today, but also for all of the work that you've been putting into this. It really is intensive, and I think you've managed to draw a really good group of people around you, and it's really important that from the academic experts, the business, the sector interest, right through to representatives from the whole range of inclusive aspects that are so important to the work that we're doing. It's very impressive. So thank you for that, and as I say, for coming on today. With that, can I move the recommendations of the paper, and can we just, I don't know how you're going to do this, Jared, but I'd just like to give everyone a 5-minute comfort break, if that's okay.
That's fine, Chair. We can mute participants and put a slide up just to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll see you back in 5 minutes. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Are we up and running again? Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Could we move on straight away then to item 15, which is Councillor Mulheron's last paper, the White Rose Forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, can I point out there's been a misprint in section 4.4.1, which refers to the council's commitments to invest in tree planting. The figure should read £3.5 million, not £1.4 million as stated in the report. So just be grateful if we could record that amendment, and also to point out that a replacements map was circulated showing the woodlands for water at figure 11 in Appendix A. So having made those clarifications, this report sets out our proposals for the White Rose Forest strategy and how the council can lead an ambitious initiative to increase tree planting throughout the district to capture and store carbon and improve biodiversity, benefiting the lives of Leeds residents. The Northern Forest, which includes the White Rose Forest, was announced by government in 2018 as part of the Environment Bill and aims to plant more than 50 million trees in and around cities of Leeds, Liverpool, Chester, Manchester, Sheffield and Hull. In response to our declaration of a climate emergency, we have, as Executive Board will be aware, committed to planting 50 hectares of woodland every year in Leeds until 2045 on our own council land. Members will also be aware that tree planting is well underway across the city now, and also that the council has worked to engage the public in preparations for planting in future years through the seed gathering initiative across public parks in the city, with those seeds then being grown at the council's own atrium nursery. The White Rose Forest strategy for Leeds aims to significantly increase the existing 17% tree canopy cover across the district to 33% by 2050, in partnership with business, residents, institutions, communities, landowners and farmers. An executive order requested to note the content and endorse the White Rose Forest strategy for Leeds, and that a professionally designed strategy document setting out all of this content will be completed early in the new year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carter, are you on the call still?
But the video doesn't seem to be working.
Ah.
No, it's not.
Okay, we can hear you.
Good. Okay, fine. I've just been asked to start the video, and I've tried to, and it still doesn't work.
Oh, you're there. You've come back.
Here now. Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh. On a positive note, I'm delighted with the paper, I have to say. I have just one comment, and it picks up on what you were saying on the last item about involvement of community committees. We've been undertaking around all 3 wards in our Outer West committee, identifying areas for tree planting, which have gone down really well. 1 or 2 hiccups, but it's gone down really well. But something that's been raised is that community committees would be quite well placed to engage with small local landowners to try and get some additional tree planting on privately owned land. And it seems to be the piece of the jigsaw that's missing. Okay, big landowners are engaged in all sorts of ways, but not the smaller landowners. And it seems to me that there's a role for community committees here, and I'd like to think that at some stage, early doors in the next schedule of community committees, we get some proper briefings at the local level with suggestions from our officers as to how we might influence and engage with local landowners.
Okay. Which officer is covering this item? Sorry.
Got Polly Cook on the call. I'm assuming Polly, I think she's just appeared actually.
Yeah, there she is. She's come on as if by magic. Hi, Polly. Would you
Hi.
like to comment, please? Thanks.
Yes, we can absolutely go around the community committees, and it's a helpful suggestion to make sure we engage with landowners. The only challenge I think we have is in terms of prioritising, how much we do in each year. So I think we just need to kind of manage those expectations as well, because I think that there could be a rush in day one, but I think that early engagement's important.
Yes.
Thank you, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd endorse those suggestions from Councillor Carter, and offer a couple of other observations. Our interaction so far with the tree planting has been from suggestions that have come from officers, but they've involved trying to plant on very heavily very heavily used open ground in community parks. And it felt like it was a desktop exercise and could do with a little bit more community involvement. So we're waiting for the next tranche of suggestions coming forward after councillors identified some land. But also the councillors were also interested in delivering street trees. And unfortunately, the tree planting song which is sung by the council is very one note and only involves the planting of slips. And it would be really good if the council could help us curate a very varied approach to tree planting across the area and be able to, for instance, deliver street tree planting, which would not only help with tree cover in urban areas, but also, of course, would help mean that the maintenance of some of our grass verges is, what's the word, taken off the schedule, potentially. Anyway, those kinds of flexible discussions would be appreciated.
Chair, could I come back in on that?
Okay.
Because it links into what Stuart's just said and what I said initially. I mean, that's the problem. It was a desktop exercise, which is why I suspect in other wards besides ours, we got complaints from residents. There had been no site visits. I know it's been difficult, but it's not been impossible. And so we had to rejig some of ours to make them much more compatible with keeping open space open and planting the trees where they would do the most use. So I'm convinced it's been something of a desktop exercise. And on the issue of planting more mature trees, the way around it is to use 106 monies where possible, or sill even better, because if you've got sill money, you could decide to get more mature specimens, which would be ideal along roadsides. And it's what we were doing on the ring road between Rodley and Dawson's Corner, which is what brought to mind the talking to private landowners, because we've done our bit at some thousands of pounds cost with fairly mature specimens, which will give great tree cover in the not too distant future, and much before these whips have established and started to grow. And if we could get into talks then with the adjacent landowners, you get a proper tree canopy all the way down our part of the ring road, which would be hugely welcome. So engaging properly with ward councillors and the community committees are essential to really kickstart and get this moving.
I think it's an interesting area, isn't it? Because it's one of those areas where everyone is in favour of planting trees, but then there are some very strong views about where that should actually take place, which I think have sometimes take people by surprise. So I think that local consultation is really important. Certainly, we found that in our ward as well. Councillor Rafiq, did you want to come back in from a parks perspective?
Thanks, leader. Vicky Marsden has been sort of overseeing some of the work around, our plan for the tree planting, and I believe we've written to just about every ward in the city with the initial suggestions, and Councillor Galton and Councillor Carter's quite right. It's not, sort of the end of thing. It is very much about, and we've already. And I've been sort of part of, and Councillor Muller-Heron's been part of some of those discussions where members have come back to us and say, well, actually, XYZ site isn't suitable. We want to consider something else, or residents don't want that. So we are doing that. Obviously, I think, as you'll appreciate, given the pandemic and the limited kind of exposure in terms of meeting with people, it has been difficult. But that is the plan, is to work with ward members and local residents to find way forward. I don't think we've taken a single tree planting sort of site forward where local ward members or residents have been against it. So, happy to proceed on those bases, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Muller-Heron, do you want to just finish off the item? Sorry, we can't hear you. Sorry, you're on mute.
Unmute, please.
Sorry, that helps. Sorry, just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Rafiq for clarifying that all ward members were notified and given an opportunity to suggest alternative sites for tree planting in their area. And I know that in some areas, local councils took up that opportunity. I'm also very well aware that across the city, we've got examples of local ward members using other pots of money to develop ideas for streets, trees in their local area. So that is clearly something that any councillor in the city can look to do using the money that they have access to in their local area. And just final point really to say that we have been planting mature and semi-mature trees alongside some of the transport infrastructure projects that we've been delivering in the city. Liptip that we referred to earlier is going to be substantially increasing the number of street trees in the city centre in particular, but we do have examples as well around the East Leeds orbital route and elsewhere in the city. So street trees are very much in favour, as well as those in our green spaces. So just encourage all members to engage proactively with the initiative, and if you've got ideas or partnerships with landowners in your area who want to come forward, please do let us know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that item. Can we agree the recommendation and move on now to Councillor Pryor's portfolio for item 16, please?
Thank you, Chair. So my first paper is on the ESIF, which is the European Structural Investment Fund. So in May, we submitted a bid to the Department for Work and Pensions to deliver a programme to support job seekers in Leeds, particularly focusing on some of those who were furthest from the labour market and those who sometimes need an extra bit of help to get into employment. The council's committed to £3 million in match funding, hopefully with a programme starting in January. The report covers a number of things, which include the provisional universal credit claimant figures, as well as a general overview of how employment and skills has done over the COVID crisis. I think it's fair to say on employment, we started the year in quite a strong position, but obviously like everywhere else, we've been hit by COVID quite significantly. So this is just one part of how we recover as a city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carter, any comments on this paper?
No, I'm happy with this, thank you.
Councillor Galton?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree the recommendations and move on to item 17, please, the Vine?
Thank you. So this paper is outlining the proposal to create a new purpose-built facility to rehouse the Vine. For people who know of the Vine or visited it, it's out in Kirkstall Ward. It was never meant to be the permanent location. and there have been issues with the building over the past few years. So this is the proposal to build something fit for purpose. The estimated cost is at 10.8 million, and actually this represents an opportunity for the council to save revenue spending quite significantly by reducing our out of area placements. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carter?
No, fine with this as well.
Councillor Galton?
I welcome the investment, Chair, and hope to see future investor save projects from Children's Services.
Thank you. Can we approve the recommendations? Then thank you, Councillor Pryor. And move on to Councillor Venner, please. For item 18.
Thank you, Chair. This is a for information paper on the Leeds practice model. The purpose of the paper is to outline the philosophy and practice of the Directorate, and it focuses on a few particular services to do that. In the current financial context, it also outlines what we're trying to achieve and how that framework will inform the review that's going to be happening of early help. There's a particular reference to restorative practice, the importance of being family-led, a trauma-informed approach, and being evidence-led. And there's a reference to the 3 planks of the Rethink formulation, Leeds practice principles and outcome-based supervision. And the report demonstrates the efficacy of the approach, both in terms of high-quality practice, which led to our outstanding status, and also financial cost savings. There are particular references to 200 less children looked after in the last few years. So I'll just make those introductory comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Carter?
Again, I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor Galton?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree the recommendation and move on to the last item on the agenda? Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. And this item is about the extra care proposal for Rothwell at Windlesford Green. Executive Board members will know that we've brought a number of papers to Executive Board about the delivery and various packages 1 and packages 2 for extra care schemes in the city. This proposal is the 3rd in package 1, and it's expected to deliver 62 units of accommodation within the scheme. And given the earlier debate around affordable housing, I'm pleased to tell Executive Board Leader that this is 100% affordable in an outer area. And so I would expect that Councillor Galton and Councillor Carter will be extremely pleased, as it way exceeds any planning policy requirement for affordable housing in that area. I think that just to remind Executive Board as well about our vision for extra care housing, that our vision is to deliver over 1,000 units of extra care housing before 2028. And as I've said, this is the 3rd one that Executive Board that I'm bringing to Executive Board for approval under package 1. So we're well underway with that delivery, Leader, I'm pleased to say. But there is also, we need to discuss this further in the pink papers, but I'll leave it there for now, Chair.
Thank you. And there's the additional map as well. That, thank you. Councillor Carter?
Yes, of course, Councillor Cooper, we welcome this. Like the discussion we had a little earlier, I would love to see such a scheme in Pudsey or Carvey and Farsley. There are 1 or 2 technical issues which I'll raise on the pink papers, but no, I absolutely welcome it.
Thank you. Councillor Galton?
Yes, Chair. As Councillor Cooper mentioned, this is the 3rd version of what was originally going to be built at Windlesford Green. And originally it wasn't going to be 100% affordable, but thanks to the amazing work of local councillors, the council saw fit to make it so. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Cooper, do you want to come back at all?
Yes, thanks for that, and of course the efforts of local members representing their community. I have to say at all times, but I'm extremely pleased that we at Leeds City Council and this administration are able to deliver what it is that you've requested, because it's what we wanted to see all along anyway. So 100% affordable rents, 100% nomination rights to Leeds City Council as well. So I'm really pleased that both Councillor Galton and Councillor Carter are happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's a good note to bring the executive board meeting of the last one of 2022 a close. It just leaves me to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and all the best for an improving situation in 2021. For the members of the board, please, are we staying on the call? Gerard, we'll just stay where we are, and we'll go off the live feed, and all non eligible people will leave the meeting. Is that